What? What? The only thing missing is music.
D-U-R-B-O, let me take control. We are on the roll.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. 5 days, Justin. 5 days.
Oh, what's in 5 days?
That's how long I went without Hearthstone. And then Blizzard gave a half-assed apology, and I said, that's good enough for me. And then I dove back in.
That apology worked for you. That's hilarious.
Well, what it did is it did effectively shift the goalposts, because I went back and ran the thought experiment of somebody doing the exact same stuff, only it's all, fuck Putin, for the proletariat, or whatever. And then it's like, yeah, you don't want to be a place where that's the place to do that thing. And
It's still weird that the American University guys that did it the next day had no consequences still.
well, they did get. Oh, you're right. But they did shut off the live stream, and
You didn't get anything. I mean, that's ultimately my problem with Blizzard. Understanding that there is a lot of competing pressures for what they're doing, is that like their PR was an absolute disaster. Releasing it on.
Oh no. Keep in mind, I'm total popcorn gifting over BlizzCon. BlizzCon is gonna be an amazing shit show. I can't wait.
Disaster.
Guy with none of all the facts here, ready to weigh in with his opinion. As I perused the headlines and just the brief captions here, my issue is this. One, I don't know what they've done in the past, like, because I've heard people say, oh, lots of people have gotten political there before, a lot of times. I don't know, somebody said that, so I'm like, yeah, has that ever happened where they've had people go political on streams? Because, like, apparently there weren't consequences. And two, their statement, I read their statement, we're like, oh, China had nothing to do with this? I'm like, I'm upset at you for saying that.
Well, I think
that to me
I think definitely China colored the overreaction, right? But if I was going to most generously interpret that, I could accept some version of, if in an alternate reality this had been a Irish Republican Army thing, or a
use
whatever
these
thing.
extreme examples, though, Brian, and that's my question is that you're talking about like literally like Marxist terror groups versus somebody who in theory is saying, hey, I want freedom. We want freedom for this group. I support with these people who are trying to peacefully protest.
Well, what I don't like about that argument is it insinuates that the rightness of the cause determines whether or not they have the right to hijack a game playing platform for their own message. And I think I can be on board with Blizzard has the right to say, they do have the right to say that moment of celebrating your win is an appropriate venue. We have that moment so that you can share your feeling of winning. It is not a blank piece of paper for you to issue whatever political press release you want. And when I try on for size the idea of, I can imagine all kinds of things that if I was running the event, I'd be like, don't do that. And they do have a rule, and both parties acknowledge that the dude broke the rule to do it. I think that the punishment was way out of line, and I like that they dialed it way, way back. Don't love that they issued two separate press releases, one to America, another with a very different message to China. That part is I'm not a fan of. I'm still surprised at the unresolved. I mean, Americans, well, but I guess again, that was distracting. Whether or not we agree with the message, the American kids, that was a distracting moment from the game stream. So I guess I can understand that.
I have no idea what's happened in the past with stuff like that. I have, again, low information opinion here. And I agree to your point. Like they're right if they say this is what the message is, this is off message. Totally agree. And my question is, did they overreact because it's China? And I would say
they definitely did. And you're right. It totally rang hollow when they said it had nothing to do with China. But like I was saying, I think the China part was only the severity of the punishment, not the impulse to do something to punish somebody doing that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think that if it was a different political situation, they would still punish them. There would still be some kind of chastisement or whatever, but no way we would have gotten this ridiculous outsized thing if it wasn't China.
I mean, to me, there's an existential problem, which I think is driving a lot of the big energy. And then there's the very mechanical problem of like, all right, how long did you suspend him for? How much money did you take away from him? Blizzard did a very good job of answering the mechanical things, and then almost made the existential question of like, maybe we're just uncomfortable that you are proactively doing the bidding of a regime that we kind of find very bad. Yeah. So it's like, it's not even like you got pulled from China because this guy said this thing. It's, or the VODs in China got pulled. It's like, no, you went out of your way to protect your relationship, knowing that they are touchy. And in that case, they actually did active harm to that by saying like, oh, China, absolutely. Now, who would even think about China here? We just got a little huffy puffy, and maybe we got a little too hasty. But don't worry, these mechanical things are now halved. Let's move on to our happy community festival.
Again, man, cannot wait to watch the shit show at BlizzCon. It's going to be amazing.
The only thing I will say about Blizzard is that, in my following of Hearthstone and knowing, people who have worked in and around Blizzard PR before this, they're good at being like Apple, like very secret. We'll show you exactly what we want to show you when it is ready to be shown. We don't want to comment on rumors. We don't want to comment on other stuff, to the point where that's become other little mini S-storms have been like, oh, it seems like they're about ready to do a new Diablo game, but they're like, nope, not this year. It's not ready for this year. We don't want to put that out. So we'll tell them about what we do know. We're doing a mobile game. And so that becomes a gigantic issue, not because they're not working on Diablo 4, but because they're always going to be restrictive on information. And that's not good. You need to drop that veil when you have a PR crisis like this. You need to be very human and say, hey, piecemeal information. We're taking a look at this again. We're doing a full internal thing. Please give us a week so we can make sure that we talk to all the parties involved and work out something that has obviously got out of control. But they did not do that. They did the way that you would handle it if you were the secretive organization, and then just released an edict at like the time where you hide news. And it's it was just bad.
Part of the problem is like, if you've been a company in America dealing business with China or any country at all, you deal with the fact that these other countries have different laws. And the thing that's creeped up the most is the Chinese policy of trying to dictate globally what's been going on. And that started a while ago. And if you're a company, you didn't know where the line was. You just sort of, we do this and we talked a bit about like, as Kaha look at like they pulled this thing out of this. Red Dawn becomes North Koreans because they don't want to offend the Chinese. You're like, well, I kind of make, that kind of reasonably makes sense in a way because that's a market. But then you find out along the way a lot of the little things. And then now you get to the point where, you've reached the realization like, wow, they have a really big impact. And we've talked about people we know who've said statements were totally true and had corporate partners they worked with. They're like, nope, you can't say this in American press because of that. And that, to me, that's a big line that's crossed. But I understand the difficulty if you're a company because, you find out that like, oh, yeah, no, this $200 million deal that's going to happen in China, the party just pulled it. They just pulled it overnight. And what are your responsibilities? What aren't they? And I was thinking, like, what's the solution? And I think that kind of like, given there's the bipartisan support for how, insidious this is, we have the rules saying that, like, you can't bribe foreign officials. Like, if you pay a bribe in another country, it's illegal to do that, even though in some ways it's the only way to get things done. A reverse sort of thing that's like, hey, listen, foreign countries cannot dictate the free speech of persons working for companies in the U.S., or they can be sanctioned. Which would then give American companies the right to say, no, we can't. If we follow your rule, this email you sent to us telling us to shut this person down is a violation of trade. Maybe. I don't know.
Are we good to go, Bryce?
I believe we are good to do the show.
Awesome.
If you guys are ready to go. And if you are, then I'll count you in. Okay.
Yeah.
Going in 3, 2.
Hello and welcome to the Weird Things podcast. I'm Eder Main, joined by Brian Brushwood.
Hello, beautiful people.
Justin Robert Young.
Hello.
Mr. Bryce Castillo.
Hey, that's me. Hi, everybody.
So this is kind of cool. We've talked a bit before about, electric airplanes and electric vehicles, flying. And the trouble has been, and my criticism, and not just me, but other people, is like, they're noisy. They're very, very noisy. And that the idea that we're going to have thousands of these things flying overhead sounds cool until you realize that it's like having, 10 million lawnmowers overhead. It's just an extreme noise problem. The company Kitty Hawk, which is, I believe, one of the ones backed by, I think, Larry Page of Google, and he's got like 2 different ones he's backed, and it's also part of a co-founder of X, which is the Google/Alphabet's Moonshot Factory, has been working on their own like vertical takeoff and lift and whatever you have aircraft. And they just released a video showing their new electric vehicle called Heaviside. That's heavy, but with HEAVISIDE, which is supposed to be much more quiet. And they showed this with a demo showing this thing take off, and they compared it to like a helicopter, which is maybe not exactly,
Not exactly
my
silent.
metric I use for, but we're looking at it here. And it only carries one person, but it's electric operated, and they're having it take off in this nice looking field. And
Do you guys have a strong sense of whether you would trust a electric vehicle in the air more or less than a petroleum fueled one?
The advantage of gas powered airplanes is that we have 100+ years of research and figuring out how you deal with all the different sort of problems that can go wrong, and we have engines and systems that are You look at a modern 747, it has not changed much in 40 plus years or whatever of that, because I mean it has consistent. I mean it's improved dramatically for reliability. The shape and design, the engines have just gotten better and better and better. That's my fear.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. The counter thought experiment would be, let's imagine that reliability or track record was less of an issue. All things being equal, would you like a flying vehicle that is powered by electricity that spins a thing, and that's the whole story, or would you prefer a vehicle that has this Rube Goldberg set of explosions happening thousands of times per minute that causes pistons to go up and down, that cause levers to do and causes rotors to turn? Like, it's funny because I'm with you. Like all things being equal, I'm more skeptical or cautious about the idea of hopping in an electric powered vehicle for flight. But intrinsically, it seems like the electric one should be the safer, more obvious option.
What? This is the example of kind of like perfect being the enemy of good, right? Because you're right. I mean, that would be a simpler option, but we have a gigantic backbone of our economy based on this one thing. So inherently, that will be safer until it's not.
Well, and also you trade off. The electric theoretically has mechanical simplicity, but it has a higher level of complication when it comes to all the from the batteries to the motors to everything else, where you've got thousands of little subsystems or computer systems, things like that running there, which again, we'll test these things. This will be the only way we want to fly in the future. Let me make that very clear. But I was saying with like an airplane engine is like, you've got a few parts. We know what these things are. We've flown these things under so many different conditions of like, oh yeah, never use this kind of rubber for your fuel line because above 40,000 feet, it freezes. Don't do this, don't do that. So we know a lot of the do's and don'ts, and it's a much more simple system than an electric craft is. So, I don't know. I early on, I want to watch a lot of robo flights.
Oh, so that's interesting. So it sounds like we might be kind of in agreement that at some point the electric system will feel like the safer one. So now it becomes a question of how long, 10 years, 15, 50 years. That's interesting. I don't really have an answer for that.
And the beautiful thing about electrical systems, and these is that you'll be able to run thousands of test flights without pilots.
Yeah.
You could just, and that's, you'll be able to test these things in ways you couldn't. And the problem we had now, like you take the 737 MAX, was you can do simulators of this thing, you can do this sort of thing, but ultimately it's a system you have to test with pilots inside it to figure out, what happens or what doesn't happen. And now there's rumors of fuselage problems, and it's not like you can just fly those things up in the air empty and put them through all these different things to see what goes wrong. With electrics, theoretically you could.
So right now on the video, I guess I missed it the first time. What exactly is the decibel difference between the electric versus gas power? So 60 decibels for a gas...
for a helicopter, 1,500 feet overhead versus 38 decibels for the heavy side.
Wow. And that's
half.
big enough for a person to be in there, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're like saying that 150 feet above you barely notice it, that it's very quiet.
Yeah,
So,
we've talked a little bit about, I don't know if we've talked about it in this context, but as a kid, one of the memories I have a lot of is hearing planes overhead. As an adult, I almost never hear planes overhead. And at first I thought, oh, maybe planes get quiet or whatever. But of course, what I realized is, no, I live near cities and roads, and those sounds get drowned out by other closer sound things. Whereas on this 7-acre property, when you walk, there's a good 200 foot elevation differential from the top part to down, the secret backwoods area. And when you get down there, it's really remarkable because I noticed that I just never noticed the sound of jet planes. And then now that I do, I obsessively check, oh, that's Southwest headed to Vegas. That's American headed to LAX. I think it's really interesting, the sounds that defined my childhood, I almost never hear except for when I go to those spots where it drowns out all the competing sounds.
The was going for a walk last night and walking along, passed by some high tension power lines, right? And it was late at night. It's very quiet. It's Burbank, and you hear all of a sudden you could hear that the Star Wars blaster sound, which is how they got it, of the dung dung sort of
It's
thing.
like a branch hitting that tension line.
But there's no branches. It was just the wind and just the vibrations from them overhead, and there was like this sort of like guitar strings being plucked. And it was sort of this low, very subtle sound. And I walked by there tons of times. I've never noticed that before, but I heard it last night. I'm like, oh, wow, that's interesting because it's it's spooky sound late at night. And then I had this epiphany. I'm like, what is this like in an earthquake? I bet you it changes its tone. And I'm like, man, I wonder if that's what sets off dogs and cats and stuff in an earthquake is high tension lines absorbing the vibrations from, that at first and then starting to, so I haven't even bothered to look that up.
This is the beauty of being a suspense novelist is that if you were a scientist, you'd have to test and find out if you're right. You don't have to. Like, that's a good enough idea that you can put it in a book and just decide it's part of that universe. I love this.
Literally, the next conversation I had with my girlfriend was, and I'm going to have Theo Cray say this in a book, and I got to put it out there.
Hey, by the way, let's also just take a moment right now because, Andrew, speaking of Theo Cray, you got a new Theo Cray book out this week, right?
Yes. Dark Pattern, of which I have a copy. Here we go. Hey, look, every audio listener. Dark Pattern, the brand new Theo Cray book number 4. Listen, Theo is an incredibly talented guy, but I've been planting sort of the idea that Theo's own self-assessment may not always be accurate.
Oh, shoot. So far, we've seen him, I don't want to say lucky because obviously he's a smart guy and things seem to work out. But not that you have to give out spoilers, but it sounds like you're hinting like he's been expecting to strike out at some point, and maybe we see that in this book.
I'm saying that he's a very smart person, and he's dealt with challenges that somebody of his particular intellect is able to make insight into. But what happens when he's not? What happens when he deals with chaos? So
so in other words, previous books he's been right because stuff has been sensible and that there is a consistent answer or pattern to be discovered. What happens if there's just not? What happens if and forgive me, this is me speculating. What happens, for example, if you have a serial killer who goes to random.org and truly makes sure to remove any possible human biases from his killings?
Yeah, or there's a concept, and I don't get too much into it, but when you want to develop a machine learning model, there's a thing called overfitting, which, if you think about the word, it's pretty much what it means. It's like if I train a model to recognize faces and I give it 100 faces to say these are the test faces, I might make a model that's really good at recognizing only those faces. And that's what you have to be careful of to make sure your model's good at picking up faces and not just specifically those faces, et cetera. So, and that's the kind of thing that you have is, confirmation bias, things like that, all this sort of stuff. So it's a little bit of a kind of a background into what's going to go on with Theo there. So
very cool.
And available when?
Tomorrow.
Are you able to pre-order on Audible?
Sure, I don't know. I'll take your money.
I'm gonna type that in. Dark Pattern.
It's me a roll of nickels. It's fine. It's good. I'll tell them.
It does seem that
Brian,
Amazon will let you spend a credit on it.
Yeah, no. You can pre-order.
But yeah, it comes out on the 15th. So if you're listening to this on or after the 15th, it's out now.
Yeah, it's out now. Go do it. And I'll tell you what, everybody absolutely should. While they're also supporting us at patreon.com/weirdthings. If you like this show, make sure you keep it going. Patreon.com/weirdthings is the place where you can do exactly that. You could also get our After Things podcast in its own feed before anybody else. Oh, it's so good. Patreon.com/weirdthings.
Yay. And by the way, Dark Pattern is the #1 new release in medical thrillers, which
Hells yeah.
I didn't know that I set out to write a medical thriller, but...
And yet here you are, the
Yeah.
king of medicine.
Yeah. So, all wrap up. Anybody wants to check it out, take a look at the Kitty Hawk and then Heaviside. I'm excited because I have been very negative about electric airplanes and stuff. Well, the noise. And they're like, well, Andrew, we listened to your podcast
Yeah.
and we solved the problem because you're the only one to bring that up. No, but I'm thrilled to see this thing that I've been dismissive about, that's a problem they've been solving and working on. And I like it when I'm like, nah, I don't think it'll work. And I'm wrong. So.
It's also a light enough kind of glidey looking craft that I feel like if all of the engines were to just, whatever, EMP crap the bed, I don't know how the flaps are controlled, but I feel like I could picture it gliding to a safe stop if need be.
Yeah, I'm sure they have summer glide ratio. Of course, if it's all fly-by-wire electric controls, I don't know. But I parachute systems, things like this, they get into it's a new era because also some of these are designed to not have pilots, so it's not like you have somebody who knows how to fly by stick and control and bring this thing down. It's like if I'm in one of these things and it goes, it shuts down, I can't even remember how to restart my iPhone, so I'm dead.
Man, I guess it would make sense. Do they have emergency parachutes where you don't even have to yank the cord? Like that's the one job that would give me anxiety. If you just told me, I'm seeing Zach Holder here in studio, nod his head. Like you just put on the thing and just jump, and then a thing will notice you're falling, and then
There are parachutes for skydivers that do automatically go off at a certain point if you have not already pulled it.
Yeah. Wow.
Or you have Tom Cruise rescue in Fallout, which was awesome. You see that movie?
Which one?
Mission Impossible Fallout?
I think I
Yes,
did.
we did. We went.
We went and saw it together. I acknowledge it was very well crafted, and
yeah, fair enough. It was a great parachute sequence there. All right, so we have a email. This is from Jeremy, and I responded to him, but I wanted to bring this up because it was actually, I think, for everybody here. And he says, hey, guys, I just added that. Says, I didn't catch us getting covered by you guys at all, and was hoping to hear your collective opinions on the matter with regard to videos published on YouTube in 2004 and 15. They have confirmed that they are UFOs. And we talked about this a while back, which was the Navy UFO stuff and some of these sightings, which the Navy's like, we're not sure what they are, which is not the same as saying it's aliens. And then the Navy actually had sort of an issue internally about, no, we didn't mean to, we did or didn't, whatever. But anyhow, the videos are out there, and we know the videos are probably very likely authentic. It says, what I would also recommend is the Joe Rogan podcast. 1360 is not a fan of him or his show, but this is a must listen for UFO enthusiasts. Commander David Fravor is on that episode, which was the pilot of the plane that recorded the 2004 video. He recounts what he saw with his eyes, something you can't see in the sensor footage, which, just Andrew speaking here, that's always a little warning sign. I'm going to tell you what's not on the video that I can't back up. But anyhow, he explains in detail the other odd happenings in the ocean, discusses gravity, propulsion, and so much more. Here's a link to the video. Blah, blah, blah. Says, I just want to end. Okay, so putting that out there, we've talked about this before, but let me finish off. He says, I want to end with a crazy thought of my own. What if at one point here on Earth we had a high civilization? Let's say they were either spacefaring or deep sea faring. If the last major cataclysm was the Younger Dryas impact 12,000 years ago, there's a possibility a portion of that civilization survived by escaping space or underwater, and the slate was wiped clean of their existence here on the planet's surface. Steel and silicon would be dust in 12,000 years. The resulting split would leaving heavy, surviving humans on the planet left in the Ice Ages technology-wise. What if we are the results of the survivors left in the Ice Ages? What if these UFOs are simply our more advanced brothers? If aliens are out of the question, then the answer would have to be humans. Anyway, sincerely love the show. I continue to listen when you guys are heads in jars.
Let's pretend just for a second that somebody's listening to this podcast and has literally no idea what you're talking about at all. So let's start with first fundamentals. There was in 2004 and I guess again in 2015 some released footage or leaked footage of what appeared to be people flying F-15s or something, very confused by the motions of something flying around.
Yes.
And for the audio listeners, I think it's safe to sum up as you get a black and white video and something's moving crazy and you have a voice of a guy saying, I don't understand how this thing's moving. It's moving crazy. In other words, kind of the same thing that we've seen in the 1960s, 1950s, right?
Yeah, and it's the point to the question is we could try to take apart these videos, which there's a hell of a lot to unpack, which Joe Nichols done a pretty cool and my good explanation of what's going on there. And I was going to get to more to the point of, we don't know what these things are. We don't know the explanation for this is, and before we jump to a 12,000-year-old civilization, that's because that was the either. I think I like Jeremy's enthusiasm, but the either or, like, hey, here's a video of something we don't understand. What if maybe it's not aliens? It's this. It's like, or maybe it is just a simple phenomenon that.
Okay, wait, we're still jumping ahead. So there are these videos.
Go wherever you want, Ryan.
What's that?
Start wherever you want.
Well, okay, so I prefer to start at the beginning. So there are the videos, and then the new news is that they've been confirmed to be from the military. They're not frauds or fakes. These were real encounters. They quote unquote confirmed that we encountered a thing that we don't know what it is. That's the new news, right?
Yes, I mean that circa weird things a few months ago. Yes,
got it. Okay, and so now the question is from our reader is speculation, and forgive me, it went by really fast and it was hard for me to hear, but it sounds like
and I got cut off, but that's okay.
It sounds like the question is let's take aliens from another starfaring galaxy off the table and instead speculate that maybe these are humanity's cousins that have been growing up in parallel somewhere nearby.
Yes.
And so where are you at on that hypothesis?
The point I was trying to get to is that we can have footage of weird things. We don't quite know what they are. And we've had this and talked about this before where, I've seen footage like, I don't know what it is, but to jump from the assumption of, I don't know what this is to, hey, must be alien or must be some flying craft or some kind or some super technology is a problematic leap for me. In the case of Fravor, who's the guy who's out there who said this, there's been some other investigative stuff that said very simple explanations of like, yeah, they were watching a surfacing submarine. This was probably a balloon, whatever. And I don't know. I'm not qualified to say, yes, this explanation is true or not. But, you have to have that category of, I don't know, because we found these things before where we go like, I can't explain it. And then we're like, oh no, it's a different kind of flare. Like, oh, wow, that flare is real. Okay, got it. I guess that's what it is.
I guess that is the question that I think we oftentimes sort of skip over in these conversations is just like, all right, from the very beginning, before we even look at any evidence, how much, like what percentage of just random noise is just going to be unidentifiable? Mm-hmm. Because there has to be something. We can all agree that like, all right, well, between the weather and the instrumentation and whoever eyes are on it or videotape is recording it, that there's going to be 1%, 2% of encounters where you're just seeing something where it's like, man, I got nothing. I have no idea. And it could be any number of explanations, but they are just going to be something that we can't put a solid definition on. And that's what I feel like this is. Although I will say, if we can indulge for a few seconds, the idea that like what would be more likely that there was a spacefaring civilization on Earth that was then wiped away and now they're visiting back home versus there's another civilization beyond the stars that is coming to visit Earth. I would say that I would find the former more likely than the latter.
So the challenge with that explanation, and he says that like, silicon and steel will be ground to dust, whatever. That's not necessarily likely to be true. We can still see the impact from the Romans' lead refineries. We find the pollution strains. We can see where they did that. We can look and see the environmental damage from that. We find we just found a 40,000-year-old bracelet that belonged to like we think a Denisovian, a 40,000-year-old bracelet. We find this, we have these archaeological finds where we find arrowheads. We find all these things. We find I have a Neanderthal flint next to me that is 200,000 years old. We find all of this. Screwdrivers and stuff like this, other materials, we would find some things, bricks or other remnants of the civilization if it was a high-tech, large-scale civilization. That should, by all accounts, there should be some, when you talk about a certain degree of level, that stuff sticks around.
Yeah.
And there's none of that. So I don't know. I had
What
What's that?
if they build their entire civilization at paper?
Well, we talk about that, but that's one of the problems we have in trying to do archaeology in the tropics or other places where they used wood and bamboo. And, there are a lot of places where we don't know what was there because, these things sort of eroded away. I'll tell you, a friend of mine is Paul Hynek, who is the son of J. Allen Hynek, who the TV series Project Blue Book's based upon, that Steven Spielberg got the rights for Close Encounters from. And Hynek's theory was he had a problem with, because Hynek was an astronomer, Hynek had a problem with the idea of aliens coming from other star systems because of just the distances bothered him. They bothered him. And he thought that he looked at all these cases for Blue Book and said that they closed it before really answering these things. And there were so many of them that couldn't be explained. And this is coming from Paul Hynek, or his father, but I don't know. But he said that his theory was interdimensional travelers. And I don't know if that explanation works any more well for me than aliens.
It's like, yeah, there's like these gigantic distances between us and other solar systems. I guess we don't. It's harder for us to quantify the distance between dimensions. So I guess theoretically, it could seem closer, but certainly we know how to get from one place to another. And as soon as we got ourselves into space, we could at least by our elementary standards say, okay, yeah, just more power this way. And eventually we're going to get there. Sure, we'll all be dead, but based on our lifespan, but we know technically what that is. I guess that is just like the bias toward the unknown, right? That like the unknown will always be slightly easier for us than something that we know is extraordinarily difficult.
Yeah, and it may not be one explanation fits everything. Like, remember we had a Trident missile launch, a few years ago out over near LA out there and it looked amazing and it looked supernatural, looked spooky, looked like some sort of big alien phenomenon. And then we're like, we find out what it is. And you might see things like, you see things with no sense of scale, and it could be this, could be that, could be weather balloons, could be these things, could be a lot of different things. And we're trying to find the one explanation where it's a lot of weird stuff going on. And I'm open to anything, aliens, whatever. Sure. I'm just going to go for whatever best fits what we know. And first is we're not good observers. So there you go, Jeremy.
Yeah. I'm with you, Jeremy. I'm with look, I understand Andrew makes a lot of valid points about the fact that it'd be really hard to hide a spacefaring civilization on Earth. But that being said, paper mache. Just think about that. Checkmate, Theus.
So last is two unrelated stories are kind of related, which was some researchers said that there was in 1964 an outbreak of apparently like a deadly fungus, and what they think caused it was a tsunami, basically, which caused a bunch of water vapor, etc., airborne spores, which just affected these trees and then caused this big problem around basically, I think, areas of the Pacific Northwest. And I thought this was such an interesting idea of, what could be causing, a deadly outbreak is triggered by some natural phenomenon. And then the correlated story was they just traced down, there was a number of people who were stricken in North Carolina with Legionnaire's disease. 134 people and 2 people died. And the researchers trying to track down the cause of this finally figured out if they think that it was, I think, a state fair where they had a hot tub display. And it wasn't people hopping in there. It was just the water vapor from the hot tubs, which are known to can harbor Legionnaires. People may have breathed these things in.
Oh, so there were just these cauldrons of a disease that were wafting into everybody's mouths.
Well, and there are certain diseases or bacterium that can only stay alive. Like, from what I understand, when you buy a hot tub, they sort of give you a primer on best practices, and they say don't leave it hot all the time because if you leave it hot all the time, then something can get cozy in there and enjoy the hotness and be not good. Like hot tub manufacturers want you to have it be hot and then not hot because that makes it unpleasant for any of these critters to stay alive in there. That's why it's more dangerous to get into like a bacterial buffet at a hotel than it is to get in your friend's hot tub who has to take 30 minutes to fire it up.
Just because that is always at the resort, it's on all the time.
Exactly.
It's on
Yeah.
24 hours a day.
So it's better or worse to leave it on?
It's worse, as I understand it, to leave it on because then you have a consistent environment for everyone to get there. And in the case of what we're describing here, not only did it grow and thrive, but it also got to catch a ride on the vapors or the water steam.
Yeah. Yeah. So gross. And I was thinking about like both these cases involved like airborne issues and. By the way, for our listeners out there, if you haven't learned to sneeze into your arm, your elbow yet, great solution to stop spreading diseases. Coughing, the arm thing, whatever. Just a point.
You dab on your haters, which is also a ADA compliant way to sneeze.
Well, I didn't know about that a few years ago. It was just sort of a thing that all of a sudden you just started seeing people do.
Oh, it's interesting because I saw you smiling as you said that, and I wondered, like, wait, is there news about that? Is that not the best practice? One of the having kids means that as they come up with new initiatives and they realize, oh wait, sneezing in your hands are the things that you shake and you manipulate objects with and all that stuff. So I guess I first started hearing about that maybe 10 years ago when my oldest started going to public school.
Yeah, I'm glad more people do it now. I'm glad more people do it now. And just remind our listeners.
And I've been called out because we were taught to develop the habit of sneezing or coughing into your hands, and then somebody I didn't even know was just like, "Really, guy?" And I'm like, "Whoa!"
Yeah. But I think that one-time annoying person telling you this does make you think, oh, yeah, because I can't tell you, like, the number of times I go to a restaurant or something, I see a worker cough into their hands and touch stuff, and you're like, this is disgusting, and we have this new technology of sneezing into your arm.
Yeah.
It just...
I started doing it because I have, like, allergic reactions to like sneezing. So I have very easily triggered allergies in certain kind of environments or whatever. So I'll just like sneeze 8 times in a row and I won't be sick. It won't be a viral thing, but I'll just keep sneezing. And so I just had to figure out a way to not, because I was already drawing a ton of attention to myself. I needed to at least be hygienic while I continued disturbing everybody at this restaurant or bar.
We see now we know that Dracula has a weakness, that he has allergies. That's why he's constantly ready to cough into his arm.
Makes sense.
I'm sorry, I have sensitivity to various plastics in your home. Ah.
Do you have a dog?
No, not a terrier. They have hair, not fur. I'm allergic to the dust, but not the dander.
Banana.
What I wonder is, are we ready to, where's the technology at to develop environmental sensors, things like this, to say like, hey, let's put things up in your home, put things up here that are capable around you to sort of sense these sort of things. And
that's interesting. Like similar to the camera revolution, where we now kind of have an expectation that maybe there's a camera on us at all times. What about cameras for other things, like basically nose cameras, something to sniff the air and say, hey, here are the times you got sick. Here's the times that you exhibited, and it could go every, I don't know, you do a thing on an Apple Watch that detects when you sneeze. Maybe there's some kind of set of muscles that flex every time you sneeze, so it keeps track of that. And then it also knows where you are. And because there are nose cameras in those places, it's like, hey, it's been a year and we have low fidelity data, but we figured it out. You are definitely allergic to cotton balls.
Well, you could do that, or you could do stuff, and we were dealing with that. We're dealing like chip arrays, things like this, to try to detect like bacteria and virus, things like this. You could, in theory, have environmental sensors that could say like, hey, yeah, no, there's Legionnaires in this area. There's this or there's that. And this is a bit of a technological leap, but after a few thousand people tragically died in 9/11, and we became aware of what the threat of terrorism, we spent trillions of dollars, building and investing in technologies like bomb detections and other stuff, and we're incredibly advanced that. And you wonder with the idea of, airborne diseases and things like this, like, billions of dollars of development there, and we could probably have really advanced tech that when cold season or flu season comes around, could tell you like, oh yeah, no, there's the conditions here are not optimal, et cetera. So.
Yeah. So what do we do with that? Once we know it's like, yeah, it's nasty, that's a bad place or whatever, I guess person by person, we could guide them and say, will be a problem. Like you get your own personal, like I love the allergy forecast. I'm constantly checking out like, oh, I have a sniffles. Am I getting sick? That's the big thing I want to know. Is the environment doing this to me, or is me doing this to me? And so I'll always check the allergy forecast. Man, I would love it if an Apple Watch could just say, hey, you've sneezed this many times, your temperature's gone up this amount. As best we could tell, there's nothing you're allergic to. You might be, we give you a personal sickness forecast of you have a 35% chance of having a flu bug or whatever.
Mm-hmm. I have a air filter running next to me, which got like a HEPA filter, which is great because we've had the fires and stuff, and I keep that close to when I sleep. And my sleeping has been better, air quality's been better. But you could build sensors into those things too that could just say like, hey, this is what we're picking up in your environment.
And that's fascinating because you look, there's obviously a standard of that in everybody's house, which is a smoke detector.
Mm-hmm.
But now you could make the argument that there are far more particular elements in your house that affect your life than something like a smoke detector, which I think was probably more of an issue in a kind of bygone era where we didn't necessarily have omnipresent microwaves and air fryers and all these very time sensitive, temperature sensitive things that you're not likely to burn stuff in the same way you would in the 40s and 50s when stuff like that was starting to become more popular.
Yeah. All right. Do you want to do picks?
Yeah, I got a weird pick, and I'm excited to share it because I think it'll lead to an interesting weird things discussion maybe. But have you ever listened to the Gimlet Media podcast, Reply All? You ever listen to this?
No.
But Ashley has. Ashley's a fan.
It's got one of the guys that used to work on Planet Money. They're delightful and fun to listen to. Occasionally, they do more lighthearted fare, like they'll find an absurd tech problem and like really investigate deeply on it to see kind of where it ends. This latest episode is called Feral Hogs, and it was fascinating. It's a 45-minute deep dive because it begins with, normally it's all tech-related stuff. It begins with the cultural phenomenon of, look, we already live in a world where there are mass shootings, and then predictably what happens is people virtue signal, like there's no excuse to have an assault rifle of any type on social media, and then other people respond. And in this case, somebody, a famous country star said, there's no reason to have an assault rifle. And then this other guy who was a fan of the country music guy said, hey, legit question. What do you do when 30 to 50 feral hogs are headed onto your property where your small children, in a matter of 3 to 5 minutes, and your small children are playing out in front? And there was something just ridiculous enough about that question that it sparked a viral phenomenon of everybody saying, get a fence, dummy. But what the folks behind Reply All picked up on is this was not a theoretical exercise. This was not a hypothetical for him. This was a real thing that happened to this guy. And so they start digging in on the phenomenon of feral hogs. And they find out, they start with a history. Not Cortez, but one of his other dudes came in and brought feral hogs with them. They'd have them live on the boat, set them free in the forest so they could get big and fat. And then whenever they were hungry, they would shoot one and have it. They used to be contained to one section of the U.S., but then people realized it's really fun to hunt feral hogs. And because the solution to the problem of an invasive species is fun, people were incentivized to bring feral hogs to other parts of the United States. And sure enough, now it is terrifying and sinister. Somebody described, city folk described, imagine living in New York and you understand the phenomenon of rats everywhere. Now imagine that the rats are 300 pounds and smarter than dogs, because you can't trap them more than once. You can use each trap. They're like the Borg. Once you trap one in a box, they're all like, we're not falling for that again. And so now I believe they're in like 38 states, and there are farmers who have to, in addition to doing all the work of farming, have to get up at 3:30 in the morning, do a sweep, shoot a whole bunch of hogs, and then do their farming, and then stay up late until 11:30, 12 at night to run around and shoot a bunch of hogs. And you get to this point as they exponentially grow, because the hogs are sexually fertile at 6 months, and they have litters of up to 14. So 14, and also once they have a litter, they can have another litter in 6 more months. It is, Texas kills 1 million hogs a year, and that barely keeps Texas at equilibrium. It is fascinating. And so anyway, I highly recommend the Reply All podcast, and specifically that episode.
All that free bacon out there just waiting to be had.
Well, okay, so one of the things they bring up is somebody has developed basically rat poison for these hogs. But the problem is, as long as they're huntable, if you a hog that you shoot on your land might have eaten this mega dose of rat poison from your neighbor's land, and so now you're feeding your kids rat poison infested hog. And so the question is, like how do you stop it? And also, from a humanitarian standpoint, a hog being shot and killed, dead within minutes, is so much better than the up to days of internal bleeding, blood out the eyes and ears and all the orifices as its liver explodes and all that stuff that happens with the poisoning. So it's a complicated issue. And at the beginning of the episode, he says, look, I understand that there are bigger topics than feral hogs, but feral hogs should be in the top 10 at any given moment. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. Then listening to this episode, I'm like, it should definitely be in the top 10 of things that are in the public consciousness.
I'm wondering, I just did a little search here because I'm like, how far evolved are we for using drones to help with hunting? Not putting the guns on them, but just to track, to figure out where
they already
things
do.
are.
As a matter of fact, there's a number of YouTube videos where they do that. Somebody sends out a drone. They with IR cameras, they're able to find the herds. They run out and they're able to bag as many of them as they can.
Right. My question was going to be how far along with actually auto hunting or having them just go out there and you just overnight, you just send the thing out there. And then next day you get a report of like, oh, there's game here, this there. Because I know we use it for wildlife tracking, but it's always an operator who's doing this. But I'm wondering like I'm going to let the drone just float over my property for a while. And then I'm going to know where them damn hogs live next, tomorrow.
It reminded me a little bit of that Love, Death, and Robots Netflix show, the one where all the farmers put on the mech suits and take on the alien critters coming in. Like that's real life today. That's not some kind of crazy sci-fi scenario.
Yeah, I like that episode, by the way. But I just think that's why I think I'm fascinated with the idea of drones when you start letting them do more of the release and forget and let it do its thing and then come back and tell you, data stuff.
Yeah.
Than having the act of like drove around and do it, because it might take hours and hours to find when you're trying to find a certain thing, but it'd be cool. Other picks?
I saw the Joker movie over the weekend.
I saw it again. I saw it a second time.
So I'm gonna look. I know this is gonna catch me heat, man, but I'm just gonna say this Joker, man, bad guy. bad. He's no hero in my book. This Joker, very
Is
bad.
this, is this a quote from President Trump?
I'm just saying, man. I'm not. I know this will lose me support with the Bernie Bros, but no. I mean, in all seriousness, look. I thought it was a really good movie. I thought it was intensely atmospheric. I think it's very smart. I think it's. I mean, certainly in that genre, one of the more unsettling movies that I've watched in recent memory. Joaquin Phoenix is awesome, and it was the first time that I ever watched a Batman movie or movie in that universe where I was like, oh God, you know what this city needs is a Batman. Like, this city needs a Batman, like, immediately. Like, not just like, there's always that idea of like, and they've even kind of steered into it with some of the Marvel stuff of like, they're like, oh, like what kind of man puts on underwear and punches bad guys or whatever? And it's like kind of trivializing, because that's where your head kind of goes, is like, all right, well, why would somebody do that? You watch that movie, you're like, oh no, he's necessary. Like I'm genuinely sad that there is going to be a time lapse between when we leave that movie and when there will be a Batman out there punching people. It was, I think a few minor quibbles that we might be able to get into in after things, but other than that, just awesome. I thought it was great.
Cool. Bryce?
I got a pick. Netflix just got the new season, or I don't know if it's new, or I don't know if it's new or if it's like the AMC thing where they put it on because the new season's about to start on TV, but the 5th season of Schitt's Creek is on Netflix now, and that show is just a delight. It I don't know. It's really sweet and it's charming, but it's also funny. I also think that this new season, it might be. Justin, you watched the older episodes more recently than I have. Did they use the F word in those earlier seasons? Because I didn't remember them doing it.
I don't remember, although I do know that there is like something in my head says that I watched versions that were uncensored, that were either bleeped in other versions of it, or like there was a difference between the Netflix versions that I watched and then because I think we wound up watching half of this season just buying it off iTunes.
Oh,
because we were like, we had just gotten to the end and we were like, Portlandia, just one more episode, sort of jonesing, and so we bought them. So I don't know. Although that does seem familiar to me, Bryce. That for whatever reason there's F words in this season.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a surprise because it's not. It's a lot of like very quiet and like small uses of it, which I think is just really fun. But it manages to hold up and keep giving these people new problems and new things to overcome, while also being really funny. So the CBC/Pop show Schitt's Creek, SCHITT''.
Yeah, that is it's kind of a real challenge for that show, because they made the decision that they were going to have these, fairly snooty to irredeemable people become increasingly more redeemable, and you're going to see more and more of their heart and less of their selfishness. And at a certain point, it's like, all right, like the reason why we showed up here was so a-holes could make fun of rednecks, right? And the rednecks could make fun of the a-holes. It's interesting to see how they juggle that while also keeping these characters growing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Andrew?
Double down one on your pick last week, South Park episode Banned in China. That was great, and it was neat to see somebody flat out, see them just flat out, make their point about what they see as problematic about our relationship, about how we talk about China. And, loved it, thought it was great, was what, does proof of what South Park does really wonderfully well. And, very, very critical of Disney, very, very critical of and sometimes South Park I'll watch an episode like, I don't agree with their point, but I'm glad they're saying something. Or here, but here's one like, I like what they're saying. This is great. But I always enjoy their take on stuff. And then my big pick is going to be watch the final episode of the first season of Righteous Gemstones, the HBO series.
Yeah.
Great show. That just grew and grew to where it's just one of my favorite shows, period. So
It's
highly
got
recommend.
it manages to get so outrageous and yet preserve so much heart, and I did not expect that on episode 1. I loved everybody. I love every character on this show.
Yeah. In the past, I think Danny McBride is brilliant, but often he plays characters that I just find they're just unlikable, and I just can't. And that was like my problem with Vice Principals. I'm like, I love these actors, but I don't like either of these people, and I do not care what happens. And so I just tuned out after like 2 or 3 episodes. Like, if they redeemed themselves, they started off so awful I didn't want to watch it. Where here, they're selfish. You know, they make bad choices, but they care about their family. They're loving people. And that's what I liked about this, was because I wanted to see people get punished for their choices, but I wanted to see them redeemed, or I wanted to see that. And I love that.
Mm-hmm. And the season finale that aired this week is really good. I mean,
Yeah.
the best scene yet for Judy Gemstone.
Yeah.
Incredible, with like the perfect button at the very end of it.
My God, she's the breakout of the show.
Oh, yeah.
There's much of a conversation. Like, she is.
Edie Patterson is the actor.
Yeah.
She's an absolute star. She's a star in that show, and they've had these few moments where it's usually they would carve out like 1 or 2 per episode of her just having some one-liner or some weird train of thought. But boy, do they just clear the floor for a solid like 2-minute monologue that is, just next level.
And most like a really, it wasn't, the whole monologue wasn't one take, but there was one that 70% of it that is a very long single cut that is.
I
adds to it.
found myself a little bit distracted. Like, how do you tell a story so funny while maintaining that? Because you have to be aware enough of the comedy to let just a little bit of that leak through, but maintain enough of the character that you get through the whole thing without messing it up.
And by the way, to the credit of the show, it's a monologue that we remember because it's hilarious, but it says there's a huge character revelation to it. Like, there's a gigantic element of who Judy Gemstone is kind of revealed in this, like, just crying, laughing monologue. And that's, I think, the hallmark of the Jody Hill, David Gordon Green, Danny McBride kind of shows, and this is it at just another level.
For me, I thought it was great, but it was just 2 words in context that just made me pause a thing and just almost cry with laughter, and that was chicken magic. And
What's funny is it's a justified context. Like, I knew exactly what he was talking about, and he was not arguing from a position of ignorance. That was the best part. Is that as ridiculous as that character is? Like, yeah, man, I understand why you're afraid of chicken magic.
They give McBride's delivery is great, and everyone, and like he gets the way he sees the world, and the way he thinks and says something that in the Gemstone character, car pranks. Car pranks. Car pranks. Of course, car pranks, you know.
He's just some guy I play car pranks with. It's just amazing set.
And there's a meta level where it's like the character McBride is playing is aware of story arcs and aware that in real life humans go through. He's like, all right, so I'm beginning my redemption arc because I've done, and he says all of the right words that he knows that the character is supposed to say, but there's that awareness to it. Oh God, I just love it. It's such a great show. So good.
Yeah. So, bear pick. It's been weird.
Hey, that's a show, everybody.
Hey, everybody, have you heard the news?
Oh, no, I haven't. Please let me know.
Keep going, Brian. Keep going. Do the rest of the song.
Please.
I'm bad rapping Hitler, and I hate to rhyme.
I don't think that's the way it goes.
All right, we're going to do After Things here in just a moment.
God dang right.
So if
Right
anybody
here.
needs to
I'm
use the
gonna
restroom, go get a
refresh
drink.
beverages.
Please go do that now.
But not at once, because that's gross.
Well, don't kink shame.
You never know.
How's it going, Juice?
So did you also watch Succession?
I did watch Succession. A very good, I think a good season ender. And also the chicken bit was very good. All the drama and gossipy stuff that I like about that show was like on display in the
I
finale.
do kind of wonder with that show, and I love this season.
Mhm.
I do wonder how long they're going to be able to kind of keep that ball in the air in the way that they have during the first two seasons, where there's like they have very much maintained like this is about who runs this company, right? Like nothing really strays too far away from that, even as we get into more of their lives and we understand the interpersonal relationships. And I wonder after last night's episode, it's like, okay, 2 seasons where we're definitely dealing with the same problem. I certainly care far more about everybody around them than I really care about the resolution to this problem. Like it's not like Game of Thrones where I feel like there's a weight of like, oh no, it's gonna matter who ends up on the Iron Throne. I would almost rather there be like, okay, yeah, this new thing happens, and now we just have to see how it plays out.
It kind of reminds me a little bit. I mentioned a while ago that I finished rewatching Veep again, and
Yeah.
Veep survives this because Veep is like constantly and impossibly funny the entire time. But a lot of seasons of Veep are about like the political elections. We're doing another election this season, which is something
But
House of Cards also did and really didn't kind of get over that hurdle of like, and so this season of Succession is a little bit like that in terms of like we gotta start doing something, and just
But like Veep had a great thing where like they would have real consequences. Like there were a few seasons where it's like, okay, they tried to do a thing, they couldn't do a thing, an election happens, and then that's it, right? But on Veep, there were times where it's like, oh yeah, and now, like,
You're
spoiler alert, like, she's out of power.
Yeah.
Like now she's a private citizen, and now we get to follow who she is as like you would think when I first watched that, and it was right when the showrunner, the original showrunner, was leaving. I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess then that's that. And then you hear they're making another season, and it's like, oh no, wait, there's still a ton of stuff. Like I do want to find out what she does during like all this other stuff. And I do think that like as great as Succession is at doing like the stations of the ultra rich, like they just kind of take without spoiling because this doesn't really have much of a bearing, but Andrew, one of the characters, and it's so funny because I didn't see anybody mentioning this, but one of the characters finds themselves in the Middle East, and then all of a sudden, one of those like Mohammed bin Salman style crackdowns on all the rich family members starts happening, and now you just see your characters kind of having to go through these like modern ultra rich problem things that I think they're so smart, they're so good at. But I do wonder, and as great as that cast is, I just wonder how many times are we going to be able to keep that ball in the air about that one central premise.
Yeah, I like the turn at the end of the episode was very good and enticing, and like sort of stirs the pot again. But also, I was kind of a little excited to be like, okay, we've got one person off the table now. They are officially out, but you can't do that.
I mean,
You can't get rid of characters anymore.
I don't know. I almost wish they would.
Yeah.
But who knows? All right, I don't need any break.
You don't need a break? All right. You guys good to do after things?
Yep.
Are we doing like just spoiler stuff?
Straight
or-
up Joker talk, or
Dig that Joker.
sorry, is that a yes? You're down for that, Justin? Or
Yeah, I didn't.
Oh yeah, no, I'm in.
okay,
Okay, so we'll do a spoiler cast for Joker. Give me 1 sec to make a graphic. All right, great. Alrighty. Well, you guys ready to go?
yes, indeed.
All right, take it away in 3, 2.
Hello and welcome to the After Things podcast. I'm Andrew Main, joined by Brian Brushwood,
Hello.
Mr. Justin Robert Young,
Yo, what's up, friends?
and Mr. Bryce Castillo.
Hey, that's me.
Gentlemen, we have all now seen the Joker.
Wait, has Bryce?
I haven't, but I'm also probably not running out to go see it.
Okay.
So, feel free
Everybody
to
who
go.
counts
is
has
that just
now
a-
seen Joker.
Is that lack of interest just it's not your thing, or just what you've heard?
It's a little 50-50 in terms of like, I don't know what this movie's I have lost the thread on what this movie's even about, and I kind of want to know a little bit of the premise of something when I go in to see it. And also, I don't want to feed into the things that I think are marketing stunts for the movie. So,
Right on.
yeah. But I hear it's good. Is it good, everybody?
I liked it a lot. I was genuinely unsettled. Like there is like an unsettling element to it. And I do think that part of the reason why it got some of the critical reaction that it got initially is because there's an element of just sort of like terror that happens not necessarily even with your main character, but with the world around it. And that to me was the movie's greatest asset. Is Todd Phillips does such a great job of demonstrating what a pile of oily rags Gotham City is, and how close it is to just igniting. Like this feels and it's something that I think a younger generation really can't remember, because I can barely remember it. It was something that had kind of been in just the generation before, but there was this idea through the 70s and early 80s that like mega cities would fall, like New York City would fall like Rome, like it would be a ruin of its former self. It would collapse on itself. And that's something that we don't really have now. Like even cities that aren't doing great, we don't think that Detroit's just gonna collapse. It still has major sports teams, right? There still are gigantic industries that run out of there. And there was certainly at least more of a pessimistic feeling in popular art about that idea. And this taps into that in a way that I can't remember a movie in recent times doing, where it's not a movie to me about Joker sparking a revolution. It's a movie about a dangerously a damaged sociopath who happens to kind of meet a moment in time with this collapsing city. And that to me is far more terrifying, because you can suspend your disbelief that a bunch of people would rally around a sociopath, because, you know, that's something where you could say, well, I would if I were in that situation, I'd stand up and say, screw you, buddy. But if it's like the city is descending into lawlessness, it's like your only recourse is, I don't know, I guess I would leave. If I were in that version of Gotham City, I would just try to get in my car and get the hell out, because otherwise it's the purge, right? Like it feels like just a world in which you're like, okay, yeah, that's where the purge would happen, because it's not the world that we live in. It's this world of like total chaos and
I
anarchy.
think it's so apropos that you mentioned Detroit specifically, because I suspect, and I'll be interested to find out if Andrew's of the same bent as I am on this. I think RoboCop was the last of the city as hellscape movies that really resonated with me. That I believed the height of it would have been early '80s, late '70s. You know, your Taxi Drivers, your Midnight Cowboys, and all this stuff. The idea that you know, if I ever go to New York, I need a crew of armed guards around me at all times because clearly it's a living hellscape. And to some extent, the numbers back it up. This is before we started to see this amazing reduction in murders in the early '90s that befuddled social scientists. But like, I think, Andrew, we talked about the nostalgia for the '60s and the technical achievement of bringing it alive in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. That movie did not resonate with me in a powerful way, but this one absolutely did. What Justin is describing as the city as a character, right down to all of the cars, it felt straight out of Blues Brothers or what was the shoot, I can't remember a few of the other ones. But there's any number of '80s urban downtown. I'm just a gritty street cop trying to deal with, you know, crime at every corner. That came alive in a way that I haven't experienced since I was a kid, and that is one of my favorite aspects of Joker.
If you grew up watching like TV in the '70s and early '80s, like everything I know about New York, I learned from like the opening credits of Welcome Back, Kotter. Right. You know, where you're watching grimy subways, all this sort of stuff. And even you'd watch shows that were shot in New York, like Electric Company or things like this. You'd sort of see this very, very grimy New York. And which, not to pick on New York, big cities, but that was sort of my impression of that. And then you watch '70s movies and stuff and you see that. And I think that it absolutely captured what we remember the big cities, the dirty big cities to sort of look like. And I thought it did a wonderful job of that. And, you know, you go back and you watch movies like, you know, like Midnight Cowboy or other stuff that, you know, are set like with grimy Times Square and just really seedy stuff, Panic in Needle Park. And, you know, it really was I thought a very, very, the setting was wonderfully reminiscent of all of that. And then back when they made those movies, they weren't set dressing. They just shot New York. Yeah. And you got that look. Here, you know, Todd Phillips went out of his way to create this sort of environment, which, I thoroughly enjoyed it. And, you know, and I get, you know, for you, like with, you know, Once Upon a Hollywood, the long takes and just trying to make the city a character in a much longer way can try other people's patience. And I understand that. And I think here it was done in, he walks from point A to point B. You notice things, you know, and it's never, let's just stop and look at how dirty the city is or whatever.
It was a it was a nonstop contest of trying to see like, oh my God, porno theater. What does that sign say? Like, I'm glad I saw it twice because
Ace in the Hole was my favorite porno title name.
What was it?
Oh, because you look at the names of the pornos, and some of them are like, I don't know if they're made up or what, but like Ace in the Hole was my favorite name of a porno movie you saw there. That was, you know, they had a lot of fun with that. The art direction that is fantastic. So I'm going to say the movie was great. Loved it. And I've, you know, I had a friend who on social media is like, oh, you know, you need to, you know, was pointing out, you know, I'm Not Really Here or whatever. Like, oh, that's the real, you know, outsider movie. That's really the better. I'm like, this is amazing because it's a DC movie. It's a studio movie, and it's getting seen by a huge audience, which in itself, that it gets to exist is amazing. And yes, there are better movies out there. Okay. There are better movies that maybe handle similar topics out there, but none that they're able to thread the needle and make it into being as widespread as this. And, you know, my takeaway from it, like, is a lot of people talk about the themes, what they think the themes are. So let's go to that. Let's each do our sort of take on what we took away as the themes on it.
This was, if I say like an inverted hero's journey, that's gonna imply.
Spoiler alerts, Brian. Didn't interrupt you, but just everybody knows we might be spoiling.
Yeah. So yeah, now we're in spoiler territory. So if you think of this as so think of the traditional hero's journey, right? You got Act One, begins with somebody at a place of comfort or at least balance. He goes into a different world. Things are at its worst, and then he realizes, "Oh my God, Neo, I'm the one." And then he's realized as a hero or whatever. Because this is an anti-hero story, you can't really play the value of good versus evil, but instead, what I got is tension about, it's almost the story of my tension as an audience member, because they do such a good job at tugging at my heartstrings and making Joker relatable for the majority of the movie, that it's only like, in a weird way, there's a tantric release after 70 minutes of confusion, 80 minutes of confusion and tension of like, I want him to, but, and then there's one specific scene, I guess we could talk spoilers, when he kills his mom, that is a big old press release that is like, guess what? Starting right now, you no longer have to relate to him as a person. You no longer have to regard that this is any way a proxy of you or your values. This is a monster. He's a beast. He's a bad man. And you're going to see the ecstasy of what happens when the Joker realizes he's the Joker. That is an astonishingly bold take for a DC movie. How did a DC movie become my second? Like honestly, next to Logan, I think this is the best comic book movie out there as a standalone affair.
I would say that, yeah, for me, I would say that the turn became in the subway when he chased down the third guy and he didn't have to kill him and he killed him. For me, that was.
I thought he did, because that guy could identify him. He had to tie up loose ends.
Well, it was, apparently our witness was I understand the motivation of but also it's the evil act to cover up the outside act.
Because also it becomes a murder then, as opposed to him having a general defense that it's self-defense. Like for the two guys in the subway that he pulls the gun on, they're beating him and they're drunk, right? So it's like on some level you can say that maybe even if he did it with extreme prejudice, he feared for his life and he took action. Whether or not he should have a gun is the different story. But when he chases the guy down, you're right, Brian, that he does need to tie up loose ends, because now he's committing a crime and he knows he's committing a crime. So he needs to make sure that this guy cannot, say anything about him.
Yeah, that's the reason. And I'm saying that, but as he made the moral chase when he's no longer under threat to murder somebody, because, and that's, the I don't know. Rules in Texas are different, so I understand. I know.
Stand your ground. Also, your ground is as fast as you can run.
Yeah. But I like it because of those issues, because it's a complex sort of thing. The turning points are there. I didn't see the killing the mom coming. When I watched the trailer, the movie in my head was going to be, he gets beat up by society, gets picked upon, and then, somebody does some cruel thing and his mom gets killed and now he lost his mom. And it's like, no, it's so much better than that, I thought. I'm going to say my takeaway themes from this, because I know there's so many people trying to project or say whatever, not to say they're wrong, is I look at this, my summation of the movie was broken people in broken systems lead to bad things. We know that he had problems, because there's a point where, the guy gives him a gun and he says, I'm not supposed to have a gun. And we know, and there, if you're paying attention, you're like, oh, they take away guns from you if you're kind of violent, a threat to yourself or threat to other people. So we know he was in the mental hospital, and Arkham seems to harbor a lot of violently crazy people and whatnot. And so he's damaged. There's something really broken. There's a reason why he has to see a state, or city appointed counselor, etc. There are all these little clues there to go that he probably had besides his childhood, he may have had a violent past. And I liked it because one of the problems is that when somebody does something horrible, we often kind of go to either one conclusion, that, well, just randomly one person's going to pop, and that's just the way it is. And if they have, if they have access to guns, then it'll be worse. Or, it's just, I don't know. I mean, we tend to go for binary sort of things. It's either this or that. And I kind of think that no, I think there are really damaged people out there. And I think that if we don't address it early on, then it becomes more problematic. And I think some of our worst mass shootings have been people who are like, the flags were there, people knew, we just didn't know how to handle people like this.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo that thematically. I think that this is a story about mental health. This is a story about the unfolding elements as the movie goes on is not you discovering like you continue to get two things on a steady pace and increasing in their impact. People that are being mean, cruel, or mean and cruel to the main character, although it's affected by the second steady revelations of exactly where is this mental state. Like, you know that he's kind of an unreliable narrator. You get more elements of that as you go forward. And then that moment when you realize, oh, wait, the reason why he is creating these gaps in his memory is because he's blocking out this horrifying element of his childhood. And it colors the whole beginning of the movie when you're like, oh, okay, is this, his mom's, certainly getting old. There's a reason why she's just sitting in the house and he's taking care of her. But also, like, she has this pipe dream that Thomas Wayne is going to take care of him. And then you realize oh, wait, God, how far did they have to get as people from the point where they both know the whole story, right? And it's just that they're so damaged mentally that we are now, it's only a revelation to us because we jumped in at this very specific point in the story. I don't know. I thought it was just awesome the way that continued to sort of unfold, and you certainly feel for him even as things are getting to their darkest, because on a certain level you're like, okay, well, you obviously have agency because you're doing these things, but also it's like you are just dealing with a lot. Like, there's so much going on for this character.
Please.
Oh, I was gonna ask to everybody. Did you mind the fact that it's quote unquote just a remix of Taxi Driver and Fight Club and yes, all those movies. Personally, I loved all of that. Like, if you go back on the second viewing, I double checked every single time they do the Fight Club thing. They very intentionally, I assume, adopt the Fight Club palette, the color palette of Fight Club. Like, to me, it's the difference of like, oh, DJ, you're just playing other people's music. It's like, no, you're combining other people's music in new and inventive ways. And I felt like that's a bit of what we got out of Joker.
I mean, to me, the biggest source materials are some of those, like Killing Joke, the comic, and damn it, I can't remember the other solo Joker comic that people always look at as like kind of canonical to that character. But the fact that he's an unreliable narrator is kind of baked into that character, or at least the source material they pulled from. So I didn't necessarily view it as a Fight Club thing specifically. And, once we get to the end of that arc and you realize like, oh no, wait, like we certainly see a lot of this character without her child, like that's a gigantic tell, is that all the elements of Zazie Bates that's not real, she's not with the kid, and then when we see her, you realize like, yeah, to the point where she's kind of cruel and weird when he's spending time with her as a kind of figment of his imagination. And you're like, oh, wow, I guess she's just kind of a mean person. It's probably why she's neglecting her kid, because we never really see her with the kid when they're hanging out. And then it's like, oh, no, wait, this is his. This is an extension of his psyche.
Yeah, I certainly think that, we will look at the movies that we're familiar with to say, I think I've seen this there or there. But I if I were to say, oh, here's my palette of movies that I think this is drawn from, it's include some of those and a lot of different ones. And ultimately we'd have to ask Todd Phillips, because like when I think about like, you know, the big twist in Fight Club, it's more about, you know, multiple personality disorder and not so much delusional sort of, you know, the idea of other people. Because remember, that was the twist in Beautiful Mind too.
Oh, yeah.
You know, of the imagine, which is, there's a lot of precedent for that, of like the delusional person. We realized they never existed in those Twilight Zone episodes, Outer Limits. And I don't know if they did I didn't think they were, I think that there is certainly a David Fincher sort of grimy sort of look that can relate to that. I don't know if that was intentional or not.
What specifically, not just the background stuff, but like specifically the light blue color palette that Fight Club was one of the vanguards to sort of establish that, like, if something is amiss, something's afoot, then, you know, this is the color palette that will be associated with that. So I felt like all of that was intentionally spoken to. Plus also, for me, and again, not that it's a contest, but given that the introduction and his first interactions with the neighbor happened shortly after what is clearly a fantasy sequence of him going in a daydream of what it would be like to be called out and brought up on stage on the What's His Name show. It was close enough that I'm like, oh, I get it. This is not really happening. This is too perfect. It's too on the nose. So, but strangely, it took nothing away from the story to perceive that yeah, none of this is real, and yet it was still amazing, right? And even the reveal didn't play as a, oh, did we get you? It played as, yeah, that didn't happen. At some point, you either figured it out or you're figuring it out right now. In either case, the bigger, more interesting story is this psycho going nuts.
Yeah, it's like asterisk. Remember, this guy's crazy. In case you forgot, this guy's crazy, and I certainly think that, you know, I love, like, I mean, like Scorsese's king of comedy, which, you know, like, and you hear like, it's a rip. I'm like, no, it's not. There is elements that are similar, but it's not that movie. And that's the thing is once we start saying, well, it's this movie and it's this movie, it's like, well, that sounds like a different movie because we've taken two different movies and combined them. And
right. This is why I'm thinking of the DJ set, because there's even an analog to the Taxi Driver You Talking to Me scene where he's dancing in his underwear, playing with the gun, and then in this case it goes in a different direction. It goes off, and he's surprised and tries to cover it up. but meanwhile, even thinking, whether you assume all of these are intentional homages or whether they're, I mean, it's delightful either way. If they are intentional, then great. If they're not intentional, what wonderful kismet.
Yeah, because I think that ultimately the story is a different one than those other stories. You know, that's the thing, is the plot of this isn't. And I think in that scene, I think that was absolutely a nod, you know, to Taxi Driver, and I think, you know, Phillips is conscious of that, of course, now given Scorsese's comments. It's like, all right, I love the way it all came together, and often too, it's like, you know, you'll see some, you know, critics will be like, it's this. It's like, show me your favorite movie, and I will tell you what influenced it, and then we can decide if that's good or bad that it had an influence. The question is what is the whole story? Like, I loved it. I thought that I wanted to compare it to another movie which I enjoyed, which was My Friend Dahmer, which was based on the comic book, based on the true story of a guy who went to high school with Jeffrey Dahmer, was friends with Jeffrey Dahmer, and it's about Jeffrey Dahmer, the high school years. And when you watch this movie, you know, Dahmer's not super sympathetic, but you know he's damaged. He needs attention. He needs help. He's not getting it because his family's messed up. And by the way, to say that somebody needs attention or help does not mean to say they're not responsible for their actions. Let me make that very clear. But you had a guy who became this prolific serial killer in high school, and the signs were there. The problem was that Dahmer went to high school with a guy who outwardly was even more nutty than him, and they thought that guy was going to be like the whack job serial killer. Well, Jeffrey Dahmer is literally picking up roadkill and bringing it to his shed and taking it apart and doing taxidermy and stuff and working his way up from pets to people. But it's a good example of, let's look at a person at this phase in their life who becomes a monster, and let's examine where monsters come from. And that's not the same as saying it's okay to be a monster, but it's saying, like, no, there's more to it than just this, you know, a person's first name, middle name, last name popped and did a horrible thing.
So, quick question. There is a person who was the casting director for this, and they had to cast some characters. And the question I have for you is, when they cast the ringleader of the 3 Wall Street bullies in the subway, did they cast the ringleader because he happened to look a lot like Batman, Christian Bale, or because he also kind of looked like Don Jr., President Trump's Wall Street son?
I think it was more of that 80s archetype, like the Wall Street, like, you know, everybody that Gordon Gekko hangs out with in the movie Wall Street, the slick back hair, which obviously, you know, that was why I think we were all excited when Christian Bale first got cast as Batman, is because he had just done American Psycho, and you're like, oh, cool, like I can see the elements of what I would want a Bruce Wayne to be. But no, I mean, I would. That's what I got from it, at least. I didn't get either of those two.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I when I saw that look, first thing that hit me was the Patrick Bateman character. And then afterwards is like everybody reads into, like I read, you know, one person like, you know, describing, you know, Thomas Wayne is like trying to play Trumpian or whatever. I don't know. But I'm like, sounds like Bloomberg, you know, like he fit, you know, the profile. I'm not saying he was, but like, you know, Bloomberg, you know, Wall Street, all this sort of stuff. That was his interest. And Bloomberg ran for mayor, was mayor of New York. And so, you know, I'm like, it becomes a Rorschach test, I think, for a lot of people. And without Phillips telling us explicitly what I did or not do, I think it becomes sort of a dangerous, dangerous, but it just becomes a.
Speaking of which, that's a really good point. That brings up one really fascinating question. Tom brought up a deliberate take last week on Cord Killers on this. And after he did that, Todd Phillips said some stuff that indicated that Tom might be right. Is this, quote unquote, our Joker? Is this the Joker that becomes a criminal mastermind, or is this the one-off story of one psychopath, and then 20 or 30 years later down the line, a criminal genius decides to emulate all of his stuff? Like, for example, as the equivalent, I think we talked about on Night Attack, that it would be like somebody emulating the Columbine murders or whatever. Like 20 years after the fact, he's like, I'm Columbine man. And because I could see it either way. Did you guys have a strong take?
Yeah, it's been floated around that you know, and the phrase I haven't heard used was the idea of anonymous. That it's like the Joker is Gotham's version of an evil anonymous. That then, you know, 30 years later, one guy usurps it, and you have that in like the Batman mythology. You had like, because we're saying, where do we go next? It's like, well, we could get that period of like the other vigilantes before Batman that were even more hardcore. Like I forget, like I was like Black Mask or something. I forget the names of them, but there was like, or the Red Hood, I think was one of them. And so like you could get into that phase of before Batman of just even more lawlessness. So who knows, you know, $450 million later, is this the Joker or not? I had problems with him being the Joker because he did not have the cleverness of the Joker, but he was in this mental fog because of all these drugs and stuff. And so if we started to see glimmers of this, then it wouldn't be inconsistent to me.
I mean, I'm fine with a more brutal sort of take on that character if they wanted to go forward with it. I can probably take a wild guess that we're going to see more stories from that period of Gotham, though, because considering how much money it made. I don't know, though. I mean, I don't know which one that I would like better. I think I might in my head like better a new person that is taking their own sinister, inspiration from this story that we saw, instead of like an older version of, Joaquin Phoenix, doing battle with the Twilight kid.
Well, but that assumes they're going to be in the same universe.
Oh, sure. I mean, whatever. I mean, I just use the fill in whoever he would match wits with in a story where that Batman was, where he was going up against Batman.
Yeah, I just remember that most of the Batmans or most of the Jokers have been a lot older than Batman, from Jack Nicholson to, was it like Sid Caesar, whoever Caesar, the guy, not Sid Caesar, but the guy who played him in the TV series and stuff.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
yeah, thank you.
No, I was saying an older Joaquin Phoenix, if they were going to do a thing where Batman is in his mid-20s, then
Yeah. So
20 years older.
the movie's made so much money and it's still going that a sequel seems inevitable, which means we're gonna want Joaquin Phoenix in there. We're gonna want the next chapter of this. So the ending I loved. Like sometimes ambiguity drives me nuts because it's just like art, all right, in your faces. Here I thought it was perfect because I'm like, yeah, he doesn't know what's real. We're gonna leave you going, what's real? I thought that was a perfect use of it. But it does mean now for a sequel, well, got to figure out what's real and what's not, or what happens next. So, any thoughts? What you want?
It might be interesting to withhold the Joker from us for the entire first act and instead ground us, like just as this movie did a really good job of establishing a dreamlike quality where there were some things we thought we were sure of and then we weren't sure and so on. What if the first act we hold back the Joker, maybe, oh, this guy escaped from Gotham or whatever, and then make it very, very concrete, and then let him show up as some kind of essentially a wizard to take us on a wild ride and bring back to us the idea that we don't know what's real and what's not. That would be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have any idea of how you would incorporate? I mean, Andrew, would you bring in would the next movie be a Batman Joker story, or would you mine the world of the Joker more pre-Batman?
I think you could go. I would go. Let Matthew Vaughn do his Batman. I think that's great. I think that you could do, and the TV show Gotham, which I watched a few episodes in, but seemed pretty fun, shows you in this environment there's such a neat sort of world, or horrifying sort of world there. So I think that I would like to see the idea of how we take this crazy, unstable, sign spinner guy and make him into a criminal mastermind. How does that happen? How does this guy who seemed, you looked at his journal and it was incoherent and he looked like, something a 9-year-old would write. How does he go to becoming somebody who can outsmart the world's greatest detective?
Well, and I think you tapped on it where you reveal the fact that he spent the majority of his adult life in a drug-induced fog, and only now are things clear to him. But the one thing he holds on to from that time is that the destination need be chaos. Like how we get there, there's all these threads that you do A and then B and then C, but then that leads to the bliss, which is when you don't know what happens next when everybody's setting fire to everything.
Yeah. One of the things I thought was so interesting was that, Ledger's Joker was wonderful in Dark Knight. And part of that was the multiple explanations for his backstory. I loved that because it was this idea of like, oh, what if we don't know? Maybe not knowing makes it a more interesting character. But here we have a movie that just ran right in the face of that, said, no, we're going to give you a backstory on this guy. And it's going to be not the most, convoluted, insane, over the top, he was a billionaire, owner of, a cable comedy channel, whatever. It was just this sad guy who horrific upbringing becomes this guy. And I kind of like that idea that he just really came from nothing, was sort of a neat take on that. So I think following that forward, though, is like, I could see you could do a Joker series where he could go up against other vigilantes, like I mentioned before, because Gotham is supposed to have this history of vigilantes that were really over the top, too violent, edgy, and it's hard to draw the line where the heroes are not. So that could be interesting.
Did we ever talk about, have you guys seen this Tom Waits interview, speaking of the Heath Ledger Joker? Did you guys happen to see this? I'll go ahead and pop this in.
No. This was popular around when that movie came out. Right?
Yeah. No, I missed it at the time. I hadn't seen it. I just wanted to know if Andrew had seen it as well. Did you ever see this Tom Waits interview that is thought to have inspired Heath Ledger's Joker?
No.
Oh, no, it's great. We'll just look at a few seconds of it.
I want to check it till you're settled in, that's all.
Let me get comfortable here.
Okay. How long? Nice shot. Here it is. okay. Story might. We all miss once in a while. How long have you been here in Australia now?
I got here last night. I was on the plane from Paris for about 22 hours. Mm-hmm. It was a fascinating flight. And
What do you do for 22 hours on a flight? You have ways of entertaining yourself?
well, they show movies that are not a big success anywhere else. They put them on the planes.
You want these? This is what you're looking for?
Thank you.
So everything from the fidgeting to the voice affectation, and the constantly, in this case, he's constantly grabbing cigarettes. I don't know if he smoked in The Dark Knight, but it's one of those things where Jason Murphy showed this to me saying, hey, I'm going to show you an interview, and at some point it might occur to you that it's similar to something else. And then I started watching it, and just like a wave, you suddenly see it. It's really great. Just look for Tom Waits interview Joker. You should be able to find it.
I believe it. I mean, I think Ledger was an amazing actor, and I could see him in the conversations. The only thing I remember, like him and Nolan, they said was like the voice should be kind of like a ventriloquist or sing song sort of voice kind of thing. But you watch that and you're like, yeah, this feels like it's like watching David Copperfield specials, then watching like Donnie and Marie specials, and you realize, or whatever John Travolta was wearing at the time, you're like, oh, this is where David Copperfield got his clothing choices from. Now I know, first it was Donny Osmond, then it was Travolta. That was the pattern. So, if you're listening this far and you haven't seen it, I recommend you see it. Like, we're gonna probably go see it again, and everybody's take is their own. If it's not for you, it's fine. But I think that the hesitancy, maybe on part of Bryce, is there is this sort of, oh, it means this, it means that, it means this, and I really think it's a movie that. I actually think it's I think it's really apolitical, to be honest with you. Because like, I don't walk away going and like, therefore this party's right or this party's wrong.
Well, hey, Bryce happens to be here. Bryce, is that your feeling?
I can see if other people who are not interested in the movie kind of having that thing. For me, I just want to be unsubscribed from the whole narrative of it. It's like a superhero origin movie. I don't know. Maybe I'll watch it when it's streaming, but I don't want to invest in it emotionally because it sounds like, of all the stupid crap I get emotionally invested in, it may not be the top of the list. But
I totally agree. I think that it is your right to sit it out, but it is worth seeing. I think at a certain point when watching a movie and having your opinion is not a thing that people should be following you or unfollowing you about. Like, it is worth checking out.
Yeah, if I'm looking at the new Regal Pass. If I end up getting that and Joker is still out, maybe I'll do it. But yeah, I don't know. But I will say, I totally get that people will have that.
For me, it definitely held up to a second viewing. What I suspect I will not see again is my reverse pick of I watched El Camino last night. Or Footnotes, the
Really?
movie. I mean,
So
it was a series of 5 to 10 minute vignettes, each of which filled in a backstory that nobody was asking for. Each one well crafted and well executed, and it was fun to see certain people appear again. But ultimately, the movie answers a question that nobody had.
yeah, I walked away from it feeling that same thing. I did enjoy it, but I did go, that movie didn't justify its existence. I think there's very cool stuff. I think the intrigue, there's some drama, there's some thrill. We see some of the same people. Apparently the identity actor guy with the vacuum shop, apparently he died like the day it came out or the day before it came out.
You said identity. Oh, got it.
Robert Forster. Yeah.
Right,
Oh.
right. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's like, oh yeah, this is exact. I mean, you watch that opening scene with him and Mike, and you're like, oh, okay, so I know exactly how it's gonna end. There's not gonna be any mystery or drama around that part of the film. And so yeah, it doesn't justify it. It's finely made.
I mean, and written and directed by Vince Gilligan, and so it's fun to look. There are certain people you don't really care if they have a good story or a bad story. You just want to hang out with them. was great to hang out with everybody involved in that. It was great across the board. Did it merit going to the movie theater instead of just waiting a few more days for it to be on Netflix? Also, is it on Netflix?
Yeah, it's a day and date.
Okay, so it
Did
was
you go
day
to
and
the
date.
theater?
I did.
How was it watching it in the theater?
Well, the whole reason I went to the theater is like, man, how much fun will it be to be like surrounded with other people who are fans? And I have to assume the one other guy also had a podcast that he was reviewing it for. Because I mean, well, granted, maybe more people were supposed to come. I did buy my ticket 20 minutes before the movie.
Hey, a real quick Joker thing before we wrap up. Todd Phillips, obviously director of The Hangover and a bunch of other comedy stuff, old school. There's something about comedic directors that you see when they do drama. In the best examples, comedy is all about communication, right? A lot of times in drama, a scene can be a little wishy-washy and it matters more because you're reading your exact emotions into how these people are feeling. Comedy, you don't have that luxury. Like, you have to slip on the pie and fall right on your butt, or else it's not as funny as it would be otherwise. And there are two scenes that, to me, exemplify Todd Phillips visually and emotionally as a comedic director being very clear to the point where it is heartbreaking or terrifying. And the two scenes are in the children's hospital with the gun, which is a pivotal moment in the story, and then probably the greatest moment of tension in the movie is after he has already done something horrifying. There is another little person in the room, and realizing that you have no idea where this is going to go and whether or not he's going to do something horrible to him. But then the sight gag that happens right after there, where it's like, it's funny, ? If it weren't like literally horrifying, like it is almost the definition of a sick, cruel joke. But I just wanted to single those out as just amazing moments in the movie.
Cool. Bryce, you did your pick?
No, you know what? Mr. Robot. Mr. Robot's back, and it's in the final season. And I don't know that we're at full speed yet. I don't think we've gotten all the way up to fourth or fifth gear, but I think it's still intriguing. We're starting to really wrap up a lot of the long, confusing threads from that story. This last episode was nice and had one big data point in it, and I think sometimes that's enough. But I don't know. Brian, did you watch Mr. Robot last night?
I have not seen the new one. I got caught up. What's funny is I did all my prep as if Cord Killers was today, and then remembered that it wasn't.
We're off this week, yeah.
Yeah.
But I really highly recommend it. I think Mr. Robot on the USA Network.
My pick is going to be the Frank Miller comic book series, The Dark Knight Returns, which came back out in 1986, which I loved back then. I remember waiting for each issue of this to come out, and the smell of the paper was exciting. And it is, as far as influencing incarnations, like every incarnation of Batman has since then has drawn something from there. Even the Schumacher Batman stuff, elements of that. And I guess Schumacher wanted to try to make this into a movie at one point. But I thought, you watch Joker, and there's you watch this, and I'm seeing the panels from Dark Knight Returns where, it's the David Endocrine show with the Ruth Westheimer character. And it's very much borrows elements from there like that. And so I think, go back and read that. And it's a wonderful, wonderful, I think, example of Batman storytelling. The idea is it takes place after Batman had retired. And, he was the old age of 55, which doesn't sound so old now. But I love that comic run. I think it's one of the best, get it as a graphic novel, one of the best ever. And I think it's been influential so much from, Nolan to Phillips now. And everybody has sort of drawn so much from that, Snyder, etc. So just one of my favorites of all time. So
Nice.
there you go.
Yeah, total cosign on that.
Yeah, cool. It's been after.
Sweet. Perfect timing, man. I got to go pick up Penny. But good chats.
Yeah, good work, everybody. We will not be back for Cord Killers today. We'll be back with Night Attack tomorrow evening. Everybody follow everybody else on the socials, on the what have you. We will be back with more weird things and after things next week. Until then, bye.
Keep it weird.